Think back to 2013. That summer, World War Z was being advertised just about anywhere where you could print Brad Pitt's profile on a pile of corpses. World War Z is a film that fetishizes despair and oozes violence from its every orifice. I don't know what that says about society, nor do I particularly care to question it, but it sure speaks lengths about how far cinema has come in the last 50 years. Rewind even further to 1968, and director George A. Romero fell into a storm of debate merely for releasing, let alone advertising, his first zombie film, Night of the Living Dead. When a film like World War Z can revel in the excesses of the apocalypse and claim billboards worldwide, it's easy to forget that Romero's comparatively tame efforts once faced a cultural climate significantly less appreciative. Romero's work produced a real terror atypical of the genre, and with it, a slew of discussions about the boundaries of the medium. In recent years, transgressive cinema has become an unruly beast, a marketing term used to sell Korean horror to the unassuming masses. But in the case of Night of the Living Dead, the label meant something. Romero's film succeeded in bucking trends and pushing extremes long before extremity was a selling point. A grisly fixation on gore and a black lead character, one that wasn't a novelty at that, were rarely seen in cinemas throughout the 60s, and became the subject of increasingly intense debate as the film picked up steam in the years following its release. I'd imagine that all of this must have come as a surprise to Romero, who's often spoken about how little thought went into Night's transgressive elements. Despite the film's prominence in racial studies in particular, owing to some striking racial imagery, Romero has always deferred credit, instead insisting that Dwayne Jones, the film's black lead, was picked only because he was the best fit for the part, going so far as to say that he resisted writing new dialogue because he happened to be black.
The film was talking about the racial issue, and to us it wasn't a racial message at all. When we cast Dwayne Jones, when Dwayne Jones agreed to do it, we didn't change the script. And when Jack and I were writing the script, it was the guy in our mind was Caucasian. So that was not our point. Our point was more the disintegration of society, the inability to communicate, the disintegration of the family unit. And that's the stuff that we were...
I think this is just one point amongst many that indicates that for Romero and his crew, Night of the Living Dead was inherently personal, rather than any sort of calculated political statement. And it's the awkward tension between Romero's personal vision and the film's cultural legacy that has fueled discussion for half a century. Aptly enough for a film in which the malevolent dead rise, Night of the Living Dead initially appears senseless, from its violence through to its bleak tone. Its transgressive elements are a blank slate for critics, whether they're concerned with race, gender, or even gang culture. As a result, it's not surprising that Night of the Living Dead has become such a cherished piece in popular film studies.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
This all leads us into 2009's Night of the Living Dead Reanimated. The product of 100 animators' efforts to completely overhaul Night's visuals, Night of the Living Dead Reanimated mixes a jumbled collage of styles into a 90-minute love letter to Romero's original work. It's often hard to associate the cultural artifact Night of the Living Dead with the content of the film itself, and Reanimated attempts to reconcile the two, allowing its viewer to witness, firsthand, the wonders of interpretation that have surrounded the film for half a century. Conceptually, Reanimated scratches a certain itch, even if you don't share a love for Romero's original film. Like the liquid TV of MTV's younger days, it promises to showcase the works of amateur animators, eclectically mixed and compiled, in this case by project leader Mike Schneider, and thrown scattershot into the wild. As a huge fan of Romero's original and animation showcases like Liquid TV, I was immediately drawn to Night of the Living Dead Reanimated, but that doesn't mean it was easy viewing. Admittedly, the cheap, unrated packaging never betrays the film's low-rent offerings, but Reanimated often sinks into some objectively bad stuff. Spoiled by the output of the internet's best animators and fueled by a devout love of Romero's original, I had expected an easygoing, fluid take on the original. What I got was something else altogether. The quality of the animation in Night of the Living Dead Reanimated varies wildly, from fully animated vignettes to still-frame offerings drawn from the darkest depths of MS Paint, and it creates an experience that's best described as messy. Although Mike Schneider's editing keeps everything in sync and coherent, the mesh of conflicting styles proves severe, while more interpretive offerings can be over-reliant on your knowledge of the original work. Needless to say, it may not make for the most streamlined viewing experience, but I'm happy to say that it all works towards something of a larger purpose. Once you've acclimated to the jarring presentation and witnessed some of the shakier offerings on display, Reanimated becomes nothing less than a testament to the influence of Romero's work. Artists from all walks of life and skill levels are represented, from polished, hypersexualized pulp comic artists to admirably low-rent stick animators, and it ultimately presents a heartwarming slice of a viewership indebted in some small way to a film approaching its 50th anniversary. Although it may enthrall and appall in equal measure, there's something to it. Take a step back and Reanimated can be appreciated independent of Night of the Living Dead, as a film about the reading and interpretation of art. Even when Night's news anchors are replaced by sock puppets, a scene clearly played for laughs, you can question the differences in representation between the two works to consider just how movies are, have been, and can be read. Some of Reanimated's defining shots, like a prolonged sequence involving Barbie dolls, or Scottish animator Callum McGaskill's turn conveying the action through impressionistic shapes, speak to those specific artists' viewings of a film, to a mood or a sense of place uncommon from viewer to viewer. Presented in such a raw style, it makes for an interesting watch. It's these viewings that are the crux of Night of the Living Dead Reanimated. In its art, whether realistic, painterly, or outright absurd, we can tap into different people's readings of a film and view it from 100 different perspectives within the space of 90 minutes. In many ways, this was the perfect film for it. Faceless though they may be, zombies are fundamentally human, and it's this aspect that leaves zombie films ripe for social commentary. Doubly so in the case of Night, which, as noted, straddled the line between cultural transgression and personal expression. Like a Rorschach test, it responds to every viewer differently, something which is repeatedly proven throughout Reanimated. Yeah, it's a mess, but there's something knowingly great on display here. Reanimated is a reflexive meditation on the consumption of film and art, one engaged with Romero's work in novel ways. In many respects, it's a visual representation of the cultural journey that has led us to bus stop adverts for World War Z. I have respect for everyone involved in this project, for encouraging me to think once more about a film I know and love, and for proving that others do too. In the end, it's not an easy watch, but you get back as much as you put in. I'm glad that it exists, and at the very least, you should be too.
I'll see what I can find.
I'll look for the bottles. There's a big key ring down there. There may be a key to the gas pump on it. I'll check.